Today it is not Gourmet pens. It is I, Esberry Brown. Soon I shall be in every household all over the world. But for now, I'm taking over for one day. Exactly one day. And today we're going to do the pea. These are some of the peas we have. There are several types of pea, and we're going to do a couple of nice ones today. The pea that we should start with is an uncial pea. Now the pea is a fun letter because it has a sort of descender, but it also has a little round bowl, and you can have fun with the bowl. So one thing you could do, if you should feel so inclined, is to do something that may be a bit, this would be, I don't know, Phoenician or something, like a very, very old type pea. Then you don't have any bowl really, because the bowls become a triangle. So if you want to do something more cuneiform-esque, then that's kind of cute, because it's a very angular, interesting way to do it. But as I said, we're going to start with the uncial. Now the thing with uncial is, as you know, that there is only capitals. Short, descender, and then a nice round little bowl like that. All right? Short ascender, because if we make this longer, then all of a sudden we move into the realm of foundational. So that's possible. So let's see how we do that. So here we have a nice uncial. Right? You can even, that is allowed, you can even make the bowl less round. Make it sort of a half round thing. So it depends a bit on how long you want to make that. You can do all these kinds of things, you see. Now, if you want to go to, say, foundational, then suddenly this descender becomes longer. You see that I've already made it a bit longer here. But you also make it a bit rounder. So we go from uncial to foundational. And foundational is very round. You have to focus on a nice circular thing there, because if this were not round enough, it's not really proper foundational. Now, the question you can ask yourself is, does it really matter? It only matters if you really want to do a very formal style of calligraphy, right? But if you decide for whatever reason that you would prefer your foundational to look more like this, you're allowed to do that, except it's no longer foundational. Well, that's fine, because it can still be fun, all right? So there we have that. Now, don't make that too long. Foundational. Okay. Now, just because we can, we should switch our pens. Oh, I dropped that very loudly, sorry. I dropped that too, sorry. I dropped that as well, sorry. Now, let's continue. Let's do something that's a lot of fun too. Something more on the Gothic side of things. All right. There's always if you do some sort of fracture like this. I always like to go from there, and then you can do these little things. All right, now this is a very elaborate majuscule or capital. So these two things are easy, right? You just you make sure that one is thinner than the other, though. You have this angle that can be a bit rounder. And then you connect it with this. And then of course you can add things to it if you feel so inclined. And there's all kinds of variations on this. You can actually also start more like this. You can also make that a bit more rounded, or sorry, a little less rounded if you prefer that, make it a bit straighter. You can do all these things. But this is a much more complicated way to do it than the uncial and the foundational are, of course. The question is, what about the minuscule, so the actual, like the small p, well, small p, the lowercase in a Gothic style would be something like this. And that's always a fun way to connect it. So make sure the descender is straight, add a little twist to that, just because that makes it a bit more visually appealing, and there you have your P. So you can do that, very easy, very easy. You can do it with this pen as well. There's only a couple of ways to start letters if you're doing Gothic, and that's one of them. Of course, there are other ways too, like for example for an A or an O. Not that we're doing that today, but you know. So anyway, there's that. Now, what if you want to do something else? What if you want to do something that you can use in your everyday life, so to speak? Because I dropped something again. Because I don't see anyone writing like this on a large scale, writing letters. A simple P, of course. The cursive P. You could do something along these lines. Now, something that I always like doing, just because, again, you add a little bit of visual appeal, is I try to take care, when I have this descender and I go back up again, I always try to make sure that I don't go back up in the exact same way. Because if you do this, I find it to look kind of boring. So I like to do it this way. And you can make that as excessive as you want. At some point it starts to look more like a really warped N or M or something. But if you do just a little bit, I think you kind of add a little bit of visual appeal. One classic way of doing a P, if you're doing cursive, is to make a very long descender. So if you want to write it, say on this line, instead of starting up here, actually start all the way up there, and you do a P like that. That is a very classic way, and that's sort of how my grandparents were trained to do a cursive P. So you can do that as well. One advantage to that is that you can really distinguish the N and the P, because in cursive, when the P looks like this and the N looks like this, those shapes are on the similar side. So then the long descender can actually make it a little easier to recognize. All right. See if we can do something slightly flexy. It's always fun, right, to add a little bit of flex. And again, you can make the bowl rounder, you can make a little less round. There's a lot of opportunities there. I've also seen people do it like this, which in a way, I kind of like. So instead of making that bowl really round, they kind of give it a little twist, making it a bit pointier. That was very poor. That's an option. So you have all these nice variations at your disposal. Now I'm just going to turn over the page here. Because here's another thing. When you're doing variations on a theme, a couple of things you can do. So, for example, when it comes to the ancio, right? You can end this descender in a very angular fashion, like this. You can also, which is something I prefer, make it a bit rounder. I like that. I think I said ancio, I meant foundational. So, foundational being a very rounded off script, I always think that this is a fun way to do it. I've also seen people do something more like this. The nib didn't really catch the paper as I wanted there. There, something like this. You add a little bit of a, let's call that a little flag to it, but that also makes it fun. Because you just add a little bit of a flourish, right? And you can make it smaller too, it doesn't have to be huge. A final thing that I have seen people do, and that can in fact also can be fun as well, is, and you're deviating from standard calligraphic practices here, but to not connect the bowl of the P all the way to the descender. That way, you have to be careful not to do it, to put them too far out, because obviously if you do this, then it's no longer one letter. But there are some advantages to doing this, because it does have an interesting visual appeal to it, and you can combine that with other letters, like the E, by not connecting those either, and then you get a whole different type of script. So that's an option too if you you want to do that. Now, let's write a word, because we're here anyway. And we have a bunch of letters now. This says paper, but the R is silent, so it looks like an N, but it's actually a silent R. I bet you didn't know that, but it's because we haven't done the R yet. So you could write that. You could of course do something like this. So here we have something that is all fracture. That's an option as well. And unfortunately we cannot yet pluralize this because we have not yet gotten to the S. But we could supplant the C and just call it a day. That is something we can do. Now, of course, if we wanted to do something a bit exotic, there is always the option of doing a P in Greek, then it's a pi, and all of a sudden that's an option. We can also do a more Cyrillic P. That's an option. So we have all these wonderful things at our disposal. Another thing that we can write, because we have the technology, because we have gone through all these letters. Is fun with PH, because you only live once, right? I have to make do with the sort of exchanging letters that we do not yet have. So there is that as an option. We can, in fact, write one word that is very dear to all of us. And for that, I think I should use my flexi nib. Let's do a fancy capital. We can write pen. Unfortunately, of course, we cannot write pens because we don't have the S, but there is pen. And another thing we can do we can write notebook. The P again is silent as in pneumonia. So you can write notebook. And as you can see, once you start to look at the world this way, you suddenly see all sorts of opportunities to use letters that you never thought of using in the first place, because it's much more fun that way. Now then, I think that is all the time we had for this week. We shall end this beautiful exposure to P, the letter P, that is. We shall return next week with the Q. Until then, I'll send you my very kindest regards, and I'll gladly see you later. Bye!